So now I'm unemployed. I was a successful electrical engineer. I had many years in the industry. And where this all began, I never thought once that I'd be in a place right now where I'm 53 years old and I'm unemployed and clearly rejected. Lots has changed through my life. I was like a lot of people. Going to high school, you sit down, they teach you the ins and outs, learn all the courses and the classes to set yourself up for success. I wanted to have opportunities to get into the second course of training or education, so then I had an opportunity to potentially do what I wanted. I would have the choice and the pick of the litter. I always had a very technical mind. I used to always think, well, you know what? I like the way things operate. I like to understand the nuts and bolts. I like to understand electricity, anything technical, electrical, mechanical. I always have this mind for moving parts, gears, electrical, electrons. How did that always work? And as a kid, I always tinkered and I always tried things, and sometimes I found myself, accidentally causing little accidents, and all at the result of me, just my inquisitive mind. And that very inquisitive mind took me to a place where I ended up advancing myself into school, post-secondary, and took electrical engineering. And it was that very inquisitive mind that had me do things when I was very young. For example, my first experience with electricity was taking a fork, and I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone one day, and there was a receptacle right next to the phone. And I thought, hey, what happens if, and I took the fork and I stuck it in the prongs of the receptacle, and all of a sudden, it all went kaflooey and the lights were out. Well, that was sort of my first experience with electricity. And clearly, it's one of those days where I never forgot. So I went to high school, finished up, and at the end of grade 12, they often teach you, do you know what you want to do? If not, we can sit you down. The guidance counselor kind of starts drafting up. I said, no, I'm good. I want to get into the electrical field. I already knew. They wanted to sit you down and draw out sort of your course of actions for your next 100 years, so to speak. Like everybody goes through something like this in their time. It feels like modern society is one in which they really want you to go down a path. Pick a path, go to school, work for 35, 40 years, and retire. And I wasn't really a lot different, other than the fact that I kind of knew what I wanted to do. So it was pretty much electrical. And going into the engineering department or faculty of that really allowed me to really understand that in a much deeper level. I didn't want to just go electrician or something like that, where you learn the superficial, in just enough to be dangerous. Although I learned all those aspects too. I took multiple labs and I really got my hands on. So essentially I trained myself to become more of what you consider a field engineer. A person that spends more time in the field getting their hands dirty and learning the trade, but also the engineering element which helped you learn and guided you through the understanding. Now all that, flicking the lights on, I was like each and every one of you. You turn the lights on at the beginning of the day, you don't pay much attention. You flick the switch, the light comes on. You flick the switch, the light comes on. You turn on the TV, the light comes on or the screen comes on. We all take it for granted until it's not there, and then the lights aren't there. And so that's essentially, I draw that parallel to my lifestyle. It's all there until it's not. And so this is very much the ultimate kind of summary of my life, if I can say that, because I ended up going to school, high school. I took electrical engineering, and I always thought, I wanted to do more than just everybody else. I wanted to become more breakthrough, do things that were a little bigger and better and more exciting than most people are doing. I wanted to know that I was going to have an impact, and I'd like to believe I did, because the first, I'd like to sort of break this down. I sort of have three major quadrants of my career. The first one was essentially Well, the first one was basically learning the ins and outs at a very superficial level, learning a lot of the trade skills, learning what electricians are learning, how to install certain aspects of that, from conduit and wiring and cable tray and all those pieces. I spent a lot of time in the industrial sector. And then the second quad, essentially, like I said, I break this down into three. The first section, not a lot to talk about other than basically learn the fundamentals. The second section is really what laid the the tracks for the rest of my career, was getting into a more specific sector, getting into the high voltage utility, the power transmission, distribution, substation work, and really learn the really scary, dangerous part of when you look in the substations and you see those guys walking around on top of the transformers, or those choppers landing down and the workers shimmying down and working on the high lines as they're energized, working on isolating bushings and CTs and insulators and lightning arresters and high voltage switches and minimum oil breakers, you name it, circuit interrupters. I worked on all of that equipment, and it really gave me an appreciation for the power system and electrical department and electrical in general. And I learned a lot by that. It really did a lot for my confidence, my understanding about the industry. And I felt like, there's more to this. I want to do more. I want to see more. And so I got more into it. I worked in more parts of that. I worked in more transmission, obviously the higher voltage, typically the 72 kV and up to 240 kV systems, 69 kV systems. I terminated high voltage cabling, 69, 72 kV cables. I learned a lot in that world, how critical it is to prepare that work, how intricate it is to prepare a proper power cable, because at that time, power cables were only good up to about 72 kV. After that, you needed gas insulated or open to air on insulators. There was a lot of different aspects to learn. But then I really got into also switchgear, medium voltage, 2400, 5 kV systems, 7200 kV systems. And so I learned those systems. But as I kind of worked in that industry, I had a few situations happen along the way. I had one coworker of mine made a mistake, turned on the system, realized he dropped a nut down below, but he knew the switchgear was energized. He used one of those extendable magnets, reached on in there and knew it was energized, but that magnet went up and ended up bridging a piece of buswork that was energized underneath, and it blew apart in his hands. He basically blew a hole in his hand. He was lucky to survive, but unfortunately it was a very, very hard day for him. And he ended up, resulting in, you have to get cataracts checked. They have to check for cataracts as the years go on, because often there's internal damage after a severe shock. Even if you survive it, often means there's irreparable damage in your heart, in your tissues. Your eyes often feel the brunt, kidneys, a lot of your organs. Remember, they're all liquid, and electricity likes to flow through the path of least resistance. So I saw people get hurt so bad in the industry. That person, he took a shock, blew a hole in the hand, and he had to deal with cataracts ongoing, heart checks. This was a very frequent regimen of his existence after that. And this was a young guy that was in his late 20s. Then, I kind of did another job. For example, we were going to do a transformer swap out, and I went in with a couple of coworkers. We were going to do a phase rotation check. So the person I was working with was a real old timer, great guy, but kind of one of those old cowboys, if you will. Didn't follow a lot of the practices now, safety and all of the safe work practices that you understand today with arc flash and shock hazards. And this individual went in there and realized that, hey, I can go in there, I can check this bare hand. I'm like, whoa, Larry. No, you can't do that. You've got to go in there. He looks at me, pauses for a second, because remember, this transformer's energized. So we've got 5,000 volts on the high side. We've got 347, 600 on the low side. So you go and measure the phase rotation, whether it's ABC or CBA, you check with a specific piece of equipment, so that when you install the new transformer, that when you rewire it, that it has the same phase rotation, because all the equipment downstream is generally 3-phase pumps, motors, fans. And so if you put the wrong phase rotation, you could pile up a lot of that equipment. So it's imperative that attention to detail is very important. So you have to check phase rotation. Well, we had this piece of equipment, but he mistook it for a motor rotation meter, which was only to be used on dead systems. So motor rotation meters, you put on your 3 leads, you turn the motor shaft, and it spits out. It starts to regenerate a magnetic field upstream, and it gives you a little bit of the ABC, CBA as you turn the motor in the designated rotation. Kind of tells you what that rotation is. And that's what this partner of mine ended up using, which is supposed to be on a dead system, but he actually used that on a system where you're actually supposed to use a phase rotation meter, which is designed and it's fused to be used only on energized systems, and he used the wrong equipment. Long story short is, I was standing there holding the equipment. It was dark. I didn't get a good look on the equipment myself. I didn't do an inspection. I did ask him, "You're good, 100%. I inspected it. He didn't have the full PPE, even though I challenged him on it. I ended up putting on some gear. I put on gloves, glasses, hearing protection, and I stood out of the harm's way holding it off to the side. And then he goes phase A, phase B, and he went to phase C. Boom! The biggest. That was a very traumatic night. I still remember that flash, and that was about 2 in the morning. And all I remember was it was the brightest of brights. You would never imagine. It was an explosion in our face. The other door that I was protecting myself with blew open, smashed me in the arm, almost felt like I broke my arm. I actually knocked me over, I rolled over, and I dove out of the way. At that time, I'm hearing sizzling, I'm seeing fire come out of the front of the transformer, and I look over, and my partner's over there, and he's got fire, smoke coming off his head. His glasses were burned. He was lucky to be wearing glasses. His hair was now burned off, his goatee burned off, gloves. We were all in a state of shock, and the transformer was still energized, burning away. That was a very traumatic night. And I still have these flashbacks from time to time. And at this time, I look over and I see people in the background looking and coming out of their homes. What was that? What was that? People are panicking. Remember, it was the dead of night. It was pitch black. And I look over at Larry and I go and try to help him out of it because he was in panic and shock, and he was almost trying to walk back into it. And I grabbed him, yanked him out of there. Now at further inspection, we look at Larry and his face is burnt. His hands are burnt. He's got burns right through to his gloves, through skin to flesh, almost to bone on his fingertips. It was traumatic experience. I would say not more than 2 or 3 minutes, the ambulance comes around the corner, picks up Larry, checks me out. We're both somewhat injured, tinnitus, ringing in the ears, injury on the arm, and Larry's in much worse shape. We get transported to the hospital. The police show up, interview us, try to, understand what the situation was. The doctors are checking us over, and unfortunately a partner had to undergo months and actually almost 2 years of skin grafting to repair his hands. And fortunately we both survived, but it was a couple of moments like that. I had other moments too, which I don't need to share the whole story, but let's put it this way. When you work in that high voltage industry, you start to see more and more of those situations, and I know of people that have been, their lives have literally been turned upside down and ruined entirely by the industry. Now, the industry I found very, very rewarding, but it was exciting when it probably shouldn't have been. And I always found it, again, just that type of environment that just always jacked me up and always had me thinking on my toes. And it was just, there's so many stories I could share. But what that started to do with time, and of course with that, there was also many days where I had to spend away from home. And because a lot of the work was out of town. And at this time, I met my wife, who was literally the best, probably, well, how can I put this? The biggest blessing in my life was meeting my wife. And she was so forgiving, all those years of me working on the road. And then we start to have kids. And we had essentially a total of about 4 kids over the course of, a handful of years. And with time and seeing more injuries and accidents and being away from home, it started to really upset me, and it started to eat me up inside and chew me up and almost spit me out, because it really took a toll on me. I couldn't live like that anymore, and as much as I love that work, it was sort of, a two-sided coin. I loved the work, but the lifestyle was eating me up inside, and I couldn't do it anymore. It was taking it out of me. And I mean, a big part of the gray hair here is every day and night working away from home, or a near miss, or a coworker getting hurt. Those were all situations that just ate me up inside. But I also knew experiences like this, that I was going to do something better. And I knew with all of those experiences that I was going to share with people in my future, and I was going to help others prevent from getting hurt. And I knew I could do better things, and I knew I could share some of those experiences. And if I could save 1 or 2 lives along the way, I was really hoping that would, pay dividends. And so that takes me kind of to the third leg of my career, to which just before I became unemployed like I am today at 53, to which I was essentially gracefully relieved of my duties from a company I was working for about 16 years. And I truly believe I made an impact there, because I started out in one capacity, and I quickly grew up because my experience, my knowledge, and that my passion for what I did drove me quickly to the management, directors. Everybody knew that this guy's an up-and-comer. He clearly has a place higher up. So it didn't take me long, and I quickly moved into a managerial type of role. And at that point, I got into training. I started training electrical safety. I started teaching some of the ins and outs. I started sharing some of my personal experiences. And it's those moments that I know stayed with a lot of people. And I know I had a big impact on a lot of people, and they thanked me for it time and time again, for the training, the knowledge, the wisdom, the do's, the don'ts. Because the industry I was in was very safety sensitive. High voltage was an everyday situation that a lot of the workers had to deal with. And it was a lot of my guidance, day in, day out, relentless, pursuit of safety. And I could not ever let my guard down. Even when somebody came at me with a unique situation, I always had to bring this back to the fundamentals. And what will happen if? What's the worst case scenario here? And if something goes wrong, how's this going to end? And so this is always some basic questions I always ask, because I saw people getting hurt in my previous career, and there's no way in my new career I could let that happen. So this went on and on for numerous years, coaching, also the implementation, because now they expanded me into committees. I became engulfed in committees that were safety related, electrical related, and safety and electrical. I was intertwined and interwoven within the committee network. My network was strong. I had a great group of people and friends and network and peers that were very helpful, both for me and my learning in that industry, but also me sharing some of my experiences and us working together hand in hand to make sure that people were doing the right things for the right reason, and ultimately doing it safely. Because everybody wants to go home in one piece. Nobody wants to be hurt. Nobody wants to see anyone else get hurt, and nobody wants to make that phone call. And so unfortunately, some of these committees were a result of some of those incidents. And so, my involvement in there, I'd like to believe, was very contributory to making some great improvements in the electrical safety and the safety of the organization. And I even went out in a subcommittee and developed and enhanced a new technology which had never been developed in the organization, to which vastly improved the safety margin of electrical workers by removing them from the arc flash environment when they're performing some of this work. Yes, there was some technology we enhanced, we basically, as a group, as a committee, which I chaired, we worked together on developing some of these technologies and incorporating that. We wrote some of the fundamental guiding rules around that, even gave sort of a bit of document of understanding, even for the engineers to really put pen to paper and really make it come to fruition. We spent a lot of time and effort bringing people together and creating some aggressive safety improvements in the organization. We brought in new PPE, new training, shared experiences, and we know we've had a positive impact. We know we did, and things were on the up and up. It was amazing. But, it got to a point where if I can feel, I love my work. I loved my workers, my co-workers. I loved the company I was working for. Life was good. We were on the upswing. But then things started to shift. There was changes in direction in the organization. Management changed. There was new ideas. There was, from the only thing I can make out, dismissal of some previously highly sought after priorities. And if I can say, a lot of what things that I considered priorities and important around safety, I feel like a lot of my ideas, a lot of my perspective were shunned with time. And so within that 16 years, it felt like there was this gradual deterioration and erosion of the way that the company perceived me, and conversely, the priorities, or the priority that I how they perceive me as a priority seemed to be shrinking. And different management, a lot of changes, and over the course of probably 7 or 8 years, I would say the back end of my career, in that last third, I felt this shifting of be seen and not heard perspective, and I almost became invisible. The environment became very toxic, in my opinion. I felt toxic. It felt like there was a lot of undermining. It felt like a lot of favoritism, and the very toxicity just, and every work environment has those moments, but it felt to me like it was trending very quickly, very aggressively, and it felt like there was nobody on my side anymore. And I wasn't the only one, but the whole environment felt, it just felt wrong. And I would say for the last 5, 6, 7 years, this gradual deterioration of isolation, exclusion, ignoring, dismissing, All these things, these traits, just took it out of me day by day, week by week. And I love my work. And even during all those moments and that sliding deterioration of attitudes and perspectives and the environment being more and more toxic every single week, I still loved my work. I loved the very work. I loved the influence I had on my immediate work group. I loved the ability to have those one-on-one conversations with my people and my coworkers and some of my close peers. And I respect some of those folks, and many of them, their hearts were in the right place. And it was just an absolute lovely place when I was working one-on-one and working within my team environment. I loved my team. I loved most of the workers there that were within my sphere of influence. And I know we were doing the right thing for the right reason. But the problem was there was all these bigger spheres and bigger influences. And it was pushing me further and further into a corner, into a darker and darker hole. In the meantime, the beginning of all of this deterioration moment, a good friend of mine who was also a PEng, who happened to work for the same organization, was starting to feel very much the same situation. This pushing him into a corner, hiding him in, burying him under drawings, making him disappear. Again, out of sight, out of mind, burying him in the back 40. He was also losing the interest. And so it was a sad thing. I saw the anguish. And this is a person that is naturally a very high performer, a very smart individual, and one of the smartest engineers I've ever met. Literally lose interest. And he had a significant pension vested with the organization, and it didn't matter. He was in the middle of his career, in his mid-30s, and he walked away. I'm done. He threw in the towel. I don't care. I'm not waiting for a package. I'm not waiting for a severance. I'm out of here. He couldn't handle it. He just left. And he went on to seek other opportunities, and he's all the much better for it now. We still keep in touch, actually weekly, almost daily. Great guy, 100%. But that literally ripped the soul right out of his chest. And you know, here I'm running in tandem. I would say I was experiencing a bit of a lag, because as he was leading into this, I wasn't feeling that yet. I was feeling that about 2 or 3 years after he started feeling that. So there was a bit of a lagging effect because of a different management, different department within the organization. So he left. He said, screw it. I'm not dealing with this crap anymore. And he left. And you know what? He went through other hardships. His wife left him. He had to give up the car. He had a major life shakeup because he was no longer an electrical engineer anymore. You know, there was this perception that what he decided to do wasn't as professional as, you know, as they were bragging up, because they were living in their own circles. And so he now had to live with the result of making an all-in-out career change that wasn't up to the professional standards by, you know, his ex. And so people looked, there were some people that were kind of looking down on his career choice change. It was a person that was working for 15 years as a ringed engineer, and then he goes and makes a drastic wholesale change, cold turkey. And so this is kind of where I'm at, dealing with all of those changes, this deterioration, this erosion of trust, and again, the toxicity was chewing away at me. Ulcers, my health was deteriorating, dealing with issues there, stress levels. My wife and my kids are way more patient than they should be, but they stuck with me through this. And I had so many hard days, ups and downs, coming home. And you should never bring your work home with you, but I had nowhere else to go. I had no allies, I had no peers I could talk to. Things were getting worse and worse. The organization was going through multiple, in a course of 5 or 6 years, they went through 3 or 4 major, and I mean major, mandatory, non-voluntary staff reductions. And I missed the first one. I missed the second one. I missed the third one. But I didn't miss this last one. So this whole situation to where we're at today inspired me to talk about what the future looks like. Because I want to talk about, now I've been accelerated into retirement. Accelerated. I no longer have a job. But through all of this, the rebound, the natural rebound for a lot of people is, hurry up, get back into the job world. But wait a minute. I started to see the light and the corporate experience. And I saw what corporate world is doing for people. It's creating robots. It's putting you in that cubicle. It's indoctrinating. It's brainwashing. It's telling you things to speak and repeat that you don't even believe in. And there will be repercussions if you don't. After I got the boots, or this fast track accelerated opportunity into retirement at 53, I might add, I just, there was let's put it this way. There's a third-party operator that's paid for by the organization to reach out to you and say, look, we're going to get you back on track. We're going to get you back on track. We'll polish up your LinkedIn account. We'll polish up your resume. We'll get you on track with any training, and let's talk. And they even assign these people to reach out to you and touch base with you and get you all dialed in. And through all of this, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. If that's what it means, my wife even said, my wife has been extremely supportive, and while nobody wants to lose their job at the least opportune time, especially when I feel like I had another good 10 years in me, nobody wants to lose that. I started to really see what the corporate world was about, and I really didn't see it up until about probably the last 5 years. And that really taught me a hard lesson. And so it wasn't no longer about the passion and the work that I loved doing so much. It was about getting my butt handed to me on a rusty platter. And the abuse, the isolation, the passive aggressive behaviors, the mistreatment, the talking down, the performance conversations that were not justified. This whole world was it was taking a toll. And so it did teach me one thing, and it actually opened my eyes, and my world became brighter actually after that door closed. Because I really do believe like they say, when one door closes, another door opens. And we'll talk about that as time goes on. But this third party that reached out to me said, we'll get you on track. No, I'm good. My wife even said, well, if you were so damn good and if they're getting willing to polish you up, then why do these yo-yos let you go? Right? So the whole question of self-worth becomes front and center. I know the value I brought. I know the self-worth. I know the value I added to the organization, or the value I added to my work group, the value I added to my family and bringing home the bacon, the value I added for myself to stay engaged and feeling like part of something bigger. But there's something there that, clearly a bigger power and a bigger objective to make sure that gets wiped clean. So that third party, yeah, they want to reach out and polish a turd, but so it wasn't voluntary, and as a result, a mandatory departure was in order. But now, retrospectively speaking, I look back and life is so much better. I talked to some people who went through a similar thing in some of the earlier series of getting the boots. I talked to a few people that had seen this 6 or 7 years before. And the initial response was shock and awe, which, I think I kind of felt the same way. But if we're being honest, not really. The writing was on the wall. There was lots of communication leading up to this, that anybody and everybody had their name in the hat. And so subconsciously, I didn't know, but I really suspected. I mean, there's more than enough rumors to say, hey, once you're in 50 plus, all bets are off. And so because I was in my 50s, actually I was 53 at the time. It quickly became apparent that, whoa, there might be a target on me. So since that time, I realized there's been some hard times, and I'm going to talk about this in future videos because I think it's very, very important, and that's the motivation for this entire channel. But how did I get here? I got here by working hard, being passionate about my work, being too invested, but also getting too comfortable. Getting too comfortable working in an organization that treats people like they're here today and gone tomorrow. So I think if there's one message in today's environment is, not getting too comfortable, learning to be dynamic, learn to try new things, which I'm doing, by the way. And unfortunately, I've sustained a couple of major losses in our family. One this year, right around the time I got let go, which just insult to injury. And one a couple of 3 years ago, which we will talk about that. But I knew I was helping people. My career objectives from the get-go was learn to be, number one, good and sound as to what I do in the electrical industry, and I didn't want any part of the electrical industry to be foreign to me. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to be the best in the business. I have people and friends on the board of the electrical code, that underwriters from the CEC. I have friends on Arc Flash on the NFPA and CSA Z462 boards. I have a network and a strong affiliation association with people all over the industry in the electrical utility, all over in the high voltage industry, electrical industry in general. I lived and breathed this world. I love it, and I wanted to bring value, and I wanted to make it better, and I feel like I have. I've made many people's lives better, and I never hurt anybody under my clock, under my watch. But the tables turned. The calendar pages flipped. I just rolled into 54, and I'm retired. And what now? Well, I mean, look around. I'm sitting out on my patio right now, and since getting let go at the end of March, no, the end of February, was actually when I was let go. March, April, May, June, July, I don't know, 5 months ago or so. It's really changed me a lot. I'm not stressed out all the time. I have more patience. The family's noticing that. But most importantly, I'm really enjoying life. You know, I spend those times, we have, you know, with the wife, kids, the pets, you know, we've been doing some traveling, and I really want to express some of that, because travel and enjoying those things that you didn't have time for when you were working because you were too enveloped in your work, you start to reject or not reject, but neglect some of those passions in life. I actually lost a lot of passions for cars, which were a major passion of mine throughout my years, because I became depressed. And you know, signs of depression are often not just the obvious, like, oh, they look bummed out, they're sad, they're not talking. It's more than that. There's other things too. And depression comes in ways of, even another major indicator are passions that you once had that you no longer have. I mean, check it out. Check out the definition and you'll find I was going through almost every one of those emotions. I was depressed. Now I go for walks, take the dog. I love life. Oh, I love life. Lost a little weight, keeping in good shape, taking the dog for a walk, we're going on vacations. Actually, we just got back from California. We did a big road trip. I love life. We did a trip to Italy last year. I love life. We did a trip to Vegas earlier this year. I love life. We got a new cat. I love life. And our pets in our house are so fun. I like to sit out here, watch the sun go down. We got this beautiful lake behind us here, as you can see. Lake and trees and a nice breeze blowing casually here. I love life. So retirement, you betcha. But it doesn't mean we're smelling the paint on the walls. It means we're gonna take some time, smell the roses, spend a lot more time with the friends and family and my day-to-day life. But we're also gonna do more traveling. There's gonna be a lot more passions, the things I never had time for. Because I think when you realize you run out of time when you're working for that corporate game. The work doesn't begin and end 9 to 5, especially when you're working on a salary like I was. It's no longer 9 to 5. It becomes 8 to 6, 7 to 7, 6 to 8, and that's what it was becoming. You start working outside of working hours. You're doing performance write-ups for your work, your staff. You're dealing with other performance issues, technical problems, solutions, reading up on emails, and it ends up becoming all-consuming, and it was eating me up inside to out. And there was times the stress was turning me inside out. I was just getting sick. So bad, in fact, my beautiful wife, on numerous occasions, didn't even care about the pension, said, the heck with it, go find another job, do something. If you can't find a job in the company, change another role because you're clearly pigeonholed. Go to another company, find something else, do something different. I always thought, you know what, maybe I'll go sell cars for a living. I don't know. Maybe go work at Home Depot selling spa kits to people that don't know much about electrical. I don't know. Didn't have to be complicated, but just something that was, not as technically challenging. Maybe didn't have to deal with people, and certainly more out of that corporate world and that environment. Because if there's one thing I realized, the corporate world is that it's a machine, and I was a cog, one cog in that machine, and I had a number, and when it was time for that number to be expired, it was retired. And that happened for me at the end of February. So please join me in this journey as I enter retirement. It's gonna be a lot of fun.